The morning sun poured through the towering glass windows of the investment hall, painting the polished marble floor with golden light, but nothing about that day felt warm. 23 wealthy investors sat in absolute silence, their expensive watches ticking away the final seconds of a meeting that would change one man's life forever. They had once competed for the chance to work with billionaire CEO Rowan Mercer, a visionary whose company had transformed thousands of lives. But now, after a devastating accident left him paralyzed from the chest down, every single one of them stood up, gathered their files, and walked away without looking back. They didn't see a genius anymore. They saw risk. They saw weakness. They saw a future they no longer wanted to finance. Yet among the empty chairs and shattered dreams, one exhausted single father with nothing left to lose quietly made the decision that would astonish the entire world. Before we continue, if you believe kindness, second chances, and courage can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Hardworking Dad. Your support helps bring inspiring stories like this to more people around the world. By noon, the luxurious conference room had become painfully quiet. Rowan remained in his wheelchair, staring through the massive windows at the city skyline he had once ruled with confidence. Just 6 months earlier, newspapers had called him the most fearless entrepreneur of his generation. His technology company had expanded into dozens of countries, employing thousands of people who believed in his dream of making advanced healthcare available to ordinary families. Then a terrible highway collision changed everything in a matter of seconds. Doctors saved his life but could not restore movement to most of his body. The headlines disappeared. The invitations stopped coming. Business partners suddenly became strangers. Investors who had praised his vision began speaking about market realities and financial responsibility, masking fear behind polite words. Rowan wasn't simply losing money. He was watching the world erase him while he was still alive. Outside the building, people hurried through the bright afternoon, unaware that an empire was collapsing only a few floors above them. Among the employees working temporary maintenance jobs inside the building was a quiet man named Elias Boone. Every morning before sunrise, Elias prepared breakfast for his 9-year-old son, packed his school bag, cleaned their tiny apartment, and rushed to work. Since losing his wife to illness 4 years earlier, every decision he made revolved around giving his son a future filled with hope instead of hardship. His paycheck barely covered rent, food, and school supplies, but he refused to complain. Every evening he reminded his son that character mattered more than comfort, even though life tested that belief almost every day. As Elias pushed a supply cart down the hallway, he noticed the conference room door standing open. Inside sat Rowan alone. The expensive chairs were empty except for the abandoned coffee cups left behind by investors who had already moved on to their next opportunity. Something about the lonely image stayed with Elias. Wealth and poverty suddenly seemed strangely similar. Both men understood what it meant to feel abandoned. Over the next several days, Elias often crossed paths with Rowan while delivering supplies throughout the building. He noticed that employees who once rushed to greet the famous CEO now offered only uncomfortable smiles before quickly walking away. Assistants avoided long conversations because everyone feared becoming connected to a failing company. Rowan remained dignified, but loneliness settled over him like a shadow that grew heavier each afternoon. Elias had no investment portfolio, no financial education, and certainly no influence among business leaders. What he possessed instead was something many successful people had forgotten. He recognized another human being carrying unbearable pain. One afternoon he quietly left a fresh cup of coffee beside Rowan with a simple handwritten note wishing him strength for the difficult days ahead. There was no signature because he wanted nothing in return. That small act became the first light Rowan had seen in weeks. He began noticing the maintenance worker who always smiled despite wearing worn-out shoes and carrying visible exhaustion on his face. Slowly, the two men developed an unexpected friendship built not on wealth or status but on simple humanity. Elias spoke about raising his son alone, balancing multiple jobs, and never giving up even when every bill felt impossible. Rowan shared memories of building his company from a rented garage where success had seemed equally impossible years before. Their worlds were completely different, yet their struggles sounded remarkably alike. Meanwhile, Rowan's company continued falling apart. Banks demanded repayments. Suppliers cancelled contracts. Employees quietly searched for new jobs. Financial analysts predicted bankruptcy within weeks. Television experts confidently declared that Rowan's leadership days were over because disability had made him incapable of leading innovation. Those broadcasts reached millions of viewers, reinforcing the belief that greatness belonged only to the physically strong. One rainy evening, Elias returned home to find his son asleep at the kitchen table surrounded by homework and drawings of rockets, airplanes, and inventions. Looking at those innocent dreams, Elias remembered something Rowan had once said during a conversation. The company had never been about profits alone. It had always been about creating affordable medical technology that could save children whose families couldn't afford expensive treatment. That mission refused to leave Elias's heart. He opened the small metal box containing every dollar he had managed to save over years of sacrifice. It represented emergency money for his son's future, money meant for education or unexpected illness. Investing it would be reckless. Losing it would leave them with almost nothing. Yet another thought refused to disappear. If everyone only believed in people during their strongest moments, then true loyalty would never exist. The next morning, under brilliant blue skies, Elias requested a meeting with Rowan. Carrying the worn metal savings box, he placed it carefully on the desk and explained that he wanted to invest every cent he owned. It wasn't enough to rescue a corporation. It wasn't even enough to impress professional investors. But it represented every dream, every overtime shift, every birthday without presents, and every personal sacrifice he had made for nearly a decade. Rowan stared at the box with tears filling his eyes because he understood the enormous cost hidden inside such a humble offering. News of the unusual investment spread through the building. Employees whispered that the maintenance worker had lost his mind. Financial experts laughed when local newspapers reported that the company's newest investor was an ordinary single father risking his life savings. Social media mocked the decision with cruel jokes. But hidden beneath the ridicule, thousands of ordinary people quietly admired Elias's courage. Many had experienced abandonment during difficult seasons of life. They recognized something powerful in a man choosing faith over fear. The story eventually reached independent journalists who looked beyond the headlines. They discovered Rowan's original mission of making healthcare affordable and Elias's extraordinary sacrifice to preserve that vision. Their reports began changing public opinion. Communities organized small fundraising campaigns. Former customers shared stories about how Rowan's innovations had saved family members. Doctors defended the importance of the company's research. Hope, almost invisible at first, slowly returned. Inspired by the growing support, several engineers who had resigned asked to return even with reduced salaries. They weren't returning for guaranteed success. They were returning because one ordinary father had reminded them why the company existed in the first place. Every new volunteer, every donated hour, and every encouraging message became another brick rebuilding what fear had nearly destroyed. Months passed beneath warm spring sunshine. Rehabilitation remained painfully slow for Rowan, but his determination became stronger than his physical limitations. He learned new ways to lead using technology, strategy, and relentless optimism. Meetings once again filled conference rooms, not because investors suddenly believed in easy profits, but because they witnessed extraordinary resilience. The same investors who had walked away months earlier requested new appointments, hoping to reclaim opportunities they had abandoned. This time Rowan welcomed them politely but remembered the silence that had filled the room on the day they left. Real leadership, he realized, wasn't measured by who stood beside you during victory but by who remained when defeat seemed certain. Beside him sat Elias, wearing the same humble clothes, still working hard every day, still picking up his son after school, and still believing that integrity would always outlast wealth. The company eventually introduced an affordable rehabilitation device inspired by Rowan's own recovery journey. Hospitals praised its effectiveness. Families who could never afford expensive therapy finally gained access to life-changing treatment. Sales exceeded expectations, but the greatest victory wasn't financial. It was seeing children walk again, elderly patients regain independence, and struggling families discover hope where none had existed before. As success returned, reporters repeatedly asked Rowan which investment had saved the company. Many expected him to mention venture capital firms or international partnerships. Instead, he always pointed toward Elias. Not because the amount of money had been large, but because it had arrived at the exact moment when belief had completely disappeared. Hope, Rowan often explained, is sometimes worth far more than millions. Elias never considered himself a hero. Every evening he still returned to the same modest apartment, helped his son finish homework, cooked simple dinners, and thanked life for another ordinary day together. But his son watched everything. He learned that courage isn't reserved for rich people, powerful people, or famous people. Courage belongs to those willing to stand beside someone everyone else has abandoned. Years later, the entrance of Rowan's company featured a simple bronze plaque instead of a glamorous monument. It carried only one sentence that every visitor stopped to read. It reminded everyone entering the building that fortunes can disappear overnight, reputations can be destroyed by circumstances beyond our control, but one act of genuine kindness can rebuild an entire future. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment below sharing where you're watching from and tell us about someone whose kindness changed your life. Your story may become the encouragement someone else desperately needs today. Special request, comment, kindness always wins, if you believe one person's faith can change another person's destiny. The world often celebrates those who arrive after success is guaranteed, but history quietly remembers the rare souls who stayed when everyone else walked away. 23 investors saw a broken man and closed their doors forever. One struggling single father saw a human being worth believing in, even when it cost him everything. In the end, the greatest investment was never measured in money. It was measured in compassion, courage, loyalty, and the incredible power of refusing to give up on another person. And sometimes, that is enough to change the world forever.